Jerome, it just might be you and me today. Ricky has appointments this afternoon, so he won't be here. And I'm waiting to see if anybody dials in yet. I don't want Ricky to miss this, so I was wondering, I should have asked him when he stopped in a little while ago if we could reschedule on another day. What's your schedule like for coming to school?
Normally I come in like Monday through Thursday. I'm always here like either 9 or 9:30.
Okay. And around how long do you stay?
I stay till around 2.
Okay. Oh, I wish I'd asked Ricky if he's going to be here tomorrow for sure, and then I could have asked you if we could do this tomorrow when you're both here. How would that be on your schedule, or is today the best day?
Well, Thursdays I normally have my like my labs.
Okay.
For like people from Stockton come.
Oh, that's right. IT boot camp. Yeah. All right. The only other possibility then is next Monday. What are your Mondays like?
Mondays are usually good.
Rats, I wished I'd asked him. Well, because I don't know his answer, we'll just keep today the way it's planned, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and start. It's a couple minutes after 12, and sometimes people dial in and it's a few minutes after 12. So just you and me, dude. Here we go. So we're on section 4 this week, and this is on interview preparation, okay? And up here, this is a true story. You know Lori Stenson, the instructor in the other room with the red hair? She's an instructor down in the far room. This is her daughter a few months ago. Texted her while we were having a staff meeting here at work. And this is what her daughter texted her. Her daughter was at a job interview. And she texted her and said, in the interview, they just asked me, what would you say is a weakness of yours? And this is what she answered in her interview. Being so lazy that I do everything correctly the first time so that I don't have to do it again. She got offered the job. You know, you start off, she's saying like, well, I'm so lazy. I don't want to have to do something over. So I'm going to do it right the first time. So I think that was a good story. It's pretty funny. All right. I have a weird thing going on. This mouse, to get it to the other screen, I have to go all the way through the far screen and come around. It's usually not set up that way. I think somebody's messing with me here. See, it went off that side over there and came up over here. I think somebody probably thinks that's funny. I'll have to ask Jeff later. All right, here we go. I saw this slide and I thought, you know, that might be what a job search feels like to some people. A lot of craziness going on, huh? A lot of stuff to do, a lot of stuff to keep in mind, a lot of stuff to remember, and it just looks like a whole jumbled bunch of stuff up there. But when we look at that and we think about preparing for a job interview, it's actually pretty organized when you think of all those main branches that come off of that center picture, you know, and how things are put into categories according to the different parts of a job search. So I like that as a description to remind us that, like, when we go all the way back to week 1 here, we're talking about putting in our structure and putting in the foundation and getting our job search set up. And so preparing for interviewing is just one example and one part of getting ready for interviewing. So when it comes to talking about getting out there and interviewing, my favorite word is practice, 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 because interviewing feels different ways to different people, right? Some people just sort of naturally talk all the time, right? And other people, maybe they're more of a listener. Maybe they feel like sometimes, oh, I'm not really sure how to answer that question or what to say. So preparing by looking at different types of questions that come up and starting to think about what it is that you'll say in response is just the practice to get ready for going out to interviewing and being aware of and being prepared for all the different types of questions that can come up. So that's what we're going to look at today. And then this is week 4 of our workshops. And on week 7, we're going to do some practice interviewing, mock interviewing. And next week, I'm going to have a packet of information for you to use to get ready for that. Okay. I'm going to ask you to like dress like the way you think you would dress to go to an interview. Okay. Do you have a tie?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe one day to wear a tie. And you don't have to wear it the whole day, but you know, we'll have our mock interview practice during this time. Okay. Have you ever had a mock interview, a practice interview? No. Okay, well, we'll do a practice interview. And today, while we go over this information here, if you spot some areas that are questions and you think, oh, I'm not sure how I would answer that or what I might say there, make a note about it and you can let me know in advance of that mock interview, and then I'll be sure and ask you some things about that topic so you get to practice it. Okay? We can even go over the information that you would want to answer with first so you're ready. All right, so I got a little ahead of myself here. Let me go back one. Oh, not in there. Well, let's start on page 1 here, and up at the top, we're just gonna touch on each of these points on page 1. And the first one here says that preparation is essential to knowing exactly what you want to make sure the employer knows about you at the interview. And it helps you to be more calm during the interview when you're prepared, right? I think of it being prepared for an interview as like getting prepared for a test. When you study and you start to read your test and you get to a question and you think, yes, I know that answer. How do you feel? You feel good. All of a sudden you're like, you know, you get that little like burst of excitement because you're like, oh, I studied it and I know that one. What happens when you get to a question and you think, gee, I don't think I even remember ever seeing that? Then you feel bad, right? You just go like this, you sort of deflate. Same thing, you know, you go to an interview, they ask you something, they ask you a question and you're prepared to answer it and you feel good, you're ready. Or they ask you a question and you just really don't have an answer and you just sort of deflate from there and it's kind of hard to recover. So being prepared is what will help overcome that. Next here is to give yourself plenty of time to get to your interview. You always want to make sure that you know where you're going and that you know just exactly how much time it's going to take. Of course, today that's easier because we just whip out our phone, look, pull up our navigation app, right? And there we go. Next is to always be sure and ask about what the parking is going to be like, because sometimes that turns out to be the big surprise. Like they say, oh, you got to park on the street. Oh, well, then you didn't know that you needed quarters to put in a parking meter, or you got to park in a garage, but it's 2 blocks away, or whatever it is. So always remember to ask so that you don't get any surprise that makes you end up like having to jog there and then you're sweating or you get there late, you know. Next here is to know the exact place and time of the meeting, who you're meeting with, and what their title is. You can always research that online if they don't tell you everything. And then you want to be sure and research the company to learn everything that you can about their business. You know, what sort of business are they in? You might go in there and you might be in a, you know, hardware, software support sort of position, but what does a company do for its business? You know, what they do doesn't necessarily impact the job you're going to do there, but they may say in the interview, they may say, well, tell me what you know about our company. Tell me what you learned about our company. So the first thing you want to know is, well, what does this company do to make money? What's their business? So easy to research online these days. Next, be sure and look your best. Dress professionally. If you have any questions about what's the appropriate thing to wear, you're going into a professional position, so at least a button-down shirt and tie and dress slacks is always going to be appropriate. I think it's pretty safe to say that people don't not get a job offer because they're too overdressed, but I think people can not get a job offer because they're not dressed up enough. Because when do we dress up mostly in life? For things that, huh? Yeah, special occasions, things where we're showing respect, like weddings, funerals, job interviews. Okay. So, um, and if in doubt, it's easy to go online and look at what sort of attire is appropriate. And also, if you're really not sure, you could even ask when someone calls you to schedule your interview. You can just say, what sort of dress is appropriate for the interview? Okay, and then they'll tell you. All right. Next on here says to organize your stuff that you're going to take with you the night before so that you're not rushed in the morning. Okay? Because what happens when you get rushed? Then you start talking bad to yourself, right? Then you can get in a bad mood, or you can start to feel kind of down, and then you're stressed. Your stress goes up. So you can help avoid all that kind of stuff, because most of us get a little nervous feeling going to an interview anyway. So let's do what we can to not add to that if we don't have to. Next here is to get a good night's sleep. When you get a good night's sleep, how do you feel when you wake up the next day? Boom, good, ready to go, right? Yeah. And so this kind of goes to back to the fact that sometimes we feel kind of nervous going to an interview. So if we've had a good night's sleep, then we can be feeling good, feeling our best. The next one here says to reread your resume. Like the night before, reread your resume. Oh, those are out of order, no wonder. Okay, so why reread your resume? Yes, yep, and to refresh your memory about the things that you've written, because maybe it's been a while since you wrote your resume, or it's been a while since you even really looked at it. And sometimes people kind of forget stuff that's on their resume. And a real easy way for an interviewer to interview us is to start right at the top of a resume and say, well, tell me about this job. What do you want to know? There's like 100 things I could tell you, but our mind is saying, okay, when we review our resume the day before, in our mind, we're saying, okay, what did I do in this job? Or what are skills I used to get this job done that relate to this new job I'm going to interview for? So we're thinking about those transferable types of things. So reviewing your resume, if somebody surprises you with that kind of an interview, you're ready to go. So that's a good preparation step. Next is to arrive poised and confident. You know, what are some things that take away our confidence and make us get there and feel stressed out? Running late, maybe we ran into traffic, maybe we had a hard time getting our parking, maybe we forgot the day before to print off extra copies of our resume, so we were trying to do it in a hurry. So that's the preparing before the night before. And next here says to be sure to greet your interviewer with a good professional greeting, firm handshake, and enthusiastic smile. And remember, this is a saying, you have how many chances? One chance to make a good first impression, right? And the recruiters say they start making decisions about who they're going to hire from the very first moment they meet them. So if we're sitting out in a waiting area waiting for someone to come and get us, right? They're already looking. They're already watching us before they ever call our name. And then they want to see how we stand up and get ready to greet them. So I always encourage people, don't have anything in your lap. Don't even be looking at a magazine or anything, because if you get a little nervous when someone calls your name, Then you got to figure out what are you going to do. You know, you got to put that magazine down. Don't be on your phone or playing a video game or something like that, because then it's just that moment of awkwardness while you like try to close that up. Just be there, be ready, okay? So I want for you and I to practice a professional greeting with each other for like 10 seconds, okay? So what I'm going to do, the way I like to suggest that you introduce yourself to other people, and this is a little different, but if you were at an interview, someone would be coming looking for you. So they're going to ask, hi, are you Jerome? There could be, you know, even if you're just the only person sitting there, there could be other people sitting there too. They may come out and ask for Jerome, like it's a question mark, you know? And so it's really, really good to stand up, and as you're standing up and getting ready to shake hands, to say, hi, yes, I'm Jerome, okay? Because sometimes we can have a tendency to just like nod our head like this or something, or just say real quietly, yes, but to speak right out and echo what they've said. Hi, yes, I'm Jerome. Then they know, you know, you're going to make that connection right then. So let's pretend for like 10 seconds you are at an interview and I'm going to come out to get you, okay? And you're sitting waiting and you're all ready. And then we're going to have this professional greeting that's going to be making eye contact, having a good smile, good firm handshake. Don't crush my bones, or don't give me one of those little limp, they call them the fish handshake. Um, and then I'll just say, hi, are you Jerome? And then you answer. Okay, are you ready? Here we go. Hi, Jerome.
Yeah, my name's Jerome.
Hi, Jerome. I'm Cindy. Nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you.
Thank you. Okay, you did perfectly great. Good, good, good. You've done that before, huh?
Yeah.
All right. You did a good job. Okay. Next, you want to remember that when you walk into the location that you're going to be interviewing, anybody that you meet could potentially give feedback to the human resources people, the manager of the job. So it's really important to treat everyone like with a smile and sort of, you know, like respectfully, because a lot of times the receptionists are trained to know who's coming for an interview and to give feedback, like how was that person when they came in. So we have to treat them like they could possibly be really helpful to our interviewing situation. All right. Always make sure that you have a pen that works. The reason I included that on there is because I've had my own experience of having a pen with me and it didn't work. And it was something I wanted to write down and I couldn't because my pen didn't work and I didn't want to go, excuse me, can I borrow your pen? So, and have something to write on, a notepad with you. And so the best way to do that is in a portfolio. Do you know what a portfolio is? That binder you open up, it's got the pad of paper on one side and the pocket where you can tuck papers on the other side. Yeah, usually there's like a little pen or pencil holder also. So it's good to get one of those. I say it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be leather. It can be that stuff they call pleather, you know, fake leather. You can get them for maybe like $10 or $15. But they're great to have. Even though you don't use them much, when you need one, you got it. Otherwise, you could just get like a, you know, file folder. You can use that too. And always make sure that you have a few copies of your resume with you. Even though, you know, you've sent your resume, you just never know when it's going to come in handy. And there's certain things in the job search that are sort of expected or anticipated. One of them is that we have a good professional greeting. Another one of them is that we do have extra copies of our resume and that we have our paper that has our list of people that we're using as our professional references, and that you have like some letters of recommendation with you, that you have all of that, you're prepared. You have questions to ask them, you got a pen to write with, you've got all that going on. So that's the easiest way, is to have a portfolio that you can keep all that information in. And I've added in here also to have a copy of your master application back from section 1, because if you didn't fill out the application through the online process, they may ask you to fill out a paper application while you're there. That's usually a good sign. Could mean, we really like him. We're thinking about having him back for a second interview, or we're thinking about making him an offer. So it's much easier to copy all that information down than to have to think up all those parts off the top of your head every time. All right, and next here's the last point, and that is to have your list of prepared questions that you want to ask during your interview. So we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. So let's go on to page 2 and talk about a few interview do's and don'ts. So we'll start with the do's. I'm just going to highlight a few. You can read the rest of these on your own, but the first one that I just really suggest is try to get there at least 10 minutes early, even 15 minutes early, because then you can go to the restroom, because you never know how long your interviewing is going to take. Maybe you think you're only going to be there a half hour and it turns out to be an hour, or maybe they're thinking, I really like this person, and as long as they're here right now, I want to take them to meet somebody else, and then you end up being there 2 or 3 hours, So it's like I always say, my mama taught me, go before you leave home. So I say, go before you start your interview. Just can make sure that, your tie is adjusted and everything is exactly the way you want it to be. All right, next here that's really important is to make sure that how you're dressed is appropriate, and your personal grooming, everything's in order. And just a word of caution these days, seems like people have real sensitivities sometimes to colognes and aftershaves and things like that. So probably best to not wear any of that kind of thing when you go to your interview. And interestingly enough, now a lot of companies, even like when you go to your new hire orientation, they tell you, like, we have a company policy, no cologne or aftershave. So then you wait to learn what is important to the company. All right, next, be sure and emphasize positive things about yourself. That's where this preparation really comes in handy again, because it's real easy for people to think negative things about themselves. And sometimes people are sort of in a hard place in life when they're out interviewing, and it's easy to be thinking some of those downer things, and it can affect our demeanor, how we show ourselves to other people. So this is just a time in particular, it's always good to do, but this is a time in particular that it's really valuable to think about positive things about yourself. And if you feel like you're a little short on doing that, then let's talk about that, okay? Next here is to be honest about your background and experience. And the reason I included this is because I got a little bit shocked about a year or so ago. There's a man named Richard Bowles, and he writes a book called What Color is Your Parachute? It's all about career development and job searching. And he's been around for like 187 years. And every year he updates his book. And last year I read in his 2015 book that upwards of 75% of people, 75% of people put something on their resume that's not exactly true, or tell something about themselves in an interview that's not exactly true. I was pretty shocked about that, because every once in a while I'll have somebody say, well, I could put this, and I'll say, well, is that the truth? Well, not exactly. I'm like, no, you can't put that. First of all, when we tell the truth, we remember, right? When we don't tell the truth about something, we can forget and get caught in our interview. So I was pretty shocked about that statistic. I can understand it. Maybe people sometimes feel kind of desperate, but it's really, really, really good to not get caught with stuff like that. So being honest, honesty is the best policy. That's what we learn, right? Next, is to thank the interviewer for their time. A lot of stuff is going on when the interview is ending, isn't it? A lot of things are going through our mind, like, how did I do? Do they like me? I wonder if I'm going to get the job. When's the second interview? When are they going to make job offers? Oh, I want to remember to get their business cards, so I got to write them a thank you note. Lots of things going on, and that's in about the last 2 or 3 minutes. So sometimes we can forget to thank the person for spending time talking with us, right? So part of preparing for that is to think, what are your words? What feels comfortable for you to say? And practicing that, just like you practice your interview questions out loud, practicing your ending, how you're going to thank them for their time. Next on here is to collect a business card from each person that you interview with. Sometimes we save that for the end. But like I said a moment ago, there's a lot of stuff going on at the end, isn't there, that we're thinking about? So I suggest, and maybe you can make a note there, I suggest getting the business card up at the beginning of the interview. When you're getting in there and you're having that little chit chat and you're getting seated wherever you're going to sit, asking them first thing for their business card. Then you've got it. There's no chance that you're going to go and end the interview and go home and think, oh, now I'm going to write them a thank you note, but I don't know their email address or I forgot to get their business card. Okay. So asking right up front. The next thing here is to send a thank you. A thank you note, whether it's an email. Email is perfectly acceptable these days, or a handwritten thank you note. So you've been to an interview before, right? Did you send a thank you note after you're done? It's okay if you said no, because a lot of people don't even know about doing that. No. Okay. So a lot of people actually kind of don't really know that. But so then what happens? A lot of people don't do that, right? So when you do that, because you do know about it now, it makes a statement like, wow, this person is really going out of their way to let me know they're interested in this job. That's really just such a like polite response. In a thank you note is a place that you can also have the opportunity to tell something that you might want them to know about you that you didn't talk about in the interview. It's also a place to tell them that you would really like to have this job if you didn't say that at the end of your interview. So kind of the rule of thumb about the thank yous is to get it out within 24 hours. So it's really timely and they get it really quickly in case they're making a quick decision. If you get it out in a week and they decided we're going to make our decision in 2 days, then they might get it after, so then it doesn't have a value to you. All right. And the last one here is that if this seems like a job you would really like to have, be sure and tell them that, because that's closing the sale, right? Like you've had a great interview, the job sounds great, it's a bunch of stuff that you know how to do and that you would like to do. Just tell them. But the words you're going to use to tell that, those are the words that you have to come up with that sound like you. Something to the effect of, I've enjoyed meeting you today and learning about this job. From everything we've talked about, I would like to let you know that I would really like to have this job. So everybody uses words a little differently, so you come up with your words, how it sounds like you. So that is something we'll practice at the mock interview. All right, next are the don'ts. Interview don'ts. First of all, obviously, don't arrive late. That makes a bad picture right away, doesn't it? Next is, don't answer the interview questions with just saying yes or no to whatever you're asked. Always be ready to give an example. So now I go back to like week 1 and 2 where we talked about developing your stories and your examples and using that PAR format. That's where these come in handy, that you're always in the back of your mind ready to answer a question and say, an example of that is the time that I did, and then you tell your story. Okay. Next is the next don't ask about salary or benefits unless the interviewer brings it up. Sometimes the first thing we want to know is how much are you going to pay, right? But that's just kind of a no-no when we're out interviewing unless they bring it up. All right, the next is don't fail to ask questions. It's expected, just like it's expected that we dress appropriately for an interview, it's expected that we've researched the company, it's expected that we have some questions to ask in the interview. Next is don't show lack of preparation. So over the last few minutes, a bunch of things we've talked about. What's an example of a couple of things that an interviewer could say, wow, I don't think they're very prepared? What could show up already?
Dressed.
Poorly dressed, yeah.
Enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, no enthusiasm. And sometimes I think people could say even they feel sort of enthusiastic, but maybe they got a really bad night's sleep. So they're so tired, it's hard to show it. They feel it inside, but they have a hard time showing it. So yeah, those are great. There's lots of different things that could show up. And then the last don't is don't over answer questions. Sometimes people say, I don't really know exactly what to say, or I don't know how much to say, or I don't know how long to talk. So a good rule, and how are you going to know how you're doing unless you practice, right? A good rule is every answer is probably a minute or so, 1 minute to 2 minutes, So even when you're practicing, you can time yourself. And using that PAR format helps give some structure to your answers. You could think like, okay, I'll tell what the situation was, then I'll tell about the actions that I took, and then I'll tell about the result. So it helps you create your answer and know how to start it, how to stop it, when to start it, when to stop it, so that you don't talk too long about it because you haven't decided in advance what you're going to tell. All right, let's go on to the next topic here. And this is just kind of a review about traditional interview questions and where these questions are going to come from. So knowing what sort of questions you might be asked helps to really reduce the stress that you can have in an interview. So on page 3, you're going to see here that you'll have interview questions about your previous work history. And under each of these sections, there are quite a number of questions that you can look through to help yourself think about how you're going to answer these questions and what you want to tell and what sort of story or example you want to give to support it. Then you see in the middle of the page that there will also be interview questions about you. This is where a lot of your transferable skills and abilities, those types of things you can bring out. And then on page 4, the next section has some questions that are questions about the new job and the company. Like they might ask you, why are you interested in this job? What from your last job gives you some experience or interest in doing this job? What do you want to get from doing this job? So there's a whole section of questions there that you can look at to be prepared with that. The next section here is questions about the future. Sometimes they want to know, like, let's say you come in and do this job, what would you like to do from here? Well, that's kind of hard to answer because you don't really know what's a promotion, right? So you can always turn that around and say that what sort of jobs do people do after they've been in this position for, say, like a year or 2 years and really learn their job? What do they get promoted to? How do people get promoted? So there are some questions that you can ask right there and that you may be asked. You can always turn those around into questions that you can ask. And then the last section here is the section that says, do you have any questions? They're asking you, do you have any questions that I can answer for you? And of course, your answer is always yes. If you tell them no, then that's another example of maybe looking like, oh, not too prepared for this interview, right? So a moment ago, I mentioned that there are certain things that are expected in the interview process that were addressed appropriately, um, that we have extra resumes with us. And so this is an example, having questions ready to ask them. It's expected, especially in this day and age, is very expected that you have some questions to ask them. So you have to make a point of coming up with some questions. Sometimes when you're online searching about the company or you're reading the job descriptions, just naturally some questions come to your mind. But if you don't have like 4 or 5 questions ready, then you might have to go out of your way to think, all right, what is something I could ask about? But usually you find those through researching the company on the internet. And then here are some examples of other things that you could ask about. All right, there are two questions in particular that you want to always, always, always be ready to answer. And technically, the first one's not a question because it doesn't have a question mark at the end, but it's tell me about yourself. And the second one is, why should I hire you? So let's talk about just really knowing that those two questions are going to come up somehow and you want to be prepared for them, right? You don't want to get asked at the end of the interview, well, Jerome, I'm picking on you because like you're the only one in here besides me. Well, Jerome, why should we offer you this job? Boom. Sometimes people say 1,000 things went through my mind, and sometimes people say nothing came to my mind. So we don't want to be in either one of those spots, right? So we can think in advance. If they ask me, why should I hire you for this job? I want to have an answer ready. What sort of things might I answer? So you go back to their job description and you look at the things that you connect yourself to, that you know how to do, whether you've learned it from schooling or you actually have some experience outside of school doing. You can talk about those. From my schooling, I've done this. From previous experience, I've done these things. And you want to direct what you say to match up into some points in their job description. And again, it's getting back and connecting you to those keywords and key concepts that they are promoting in their job description. So that is how you're prepared, knowing that those two questions are most likely going to come up. So let's talk about tell me about yourself a little bit. So on page 5, there are several parts to that question. And you'll tell a little bit from your past, a little bit about where you are right now, and then a little bit about something that goes into your future, okay? So everybody has a different story about their life and where they are right now. And this is something, if you want to work on this, just you and I talking, we can set up a time and do that. And so a little bit about yourself from the past, and I just have to make this up while we sit in this workshop because everybody has a different story. But you may talk about what led you to choose the program of education you're in right now and come to OSC. What led you to do that? Just as an example.
It's pretty much always been interested in computers.
Okay.
So like that's something that I've always wanted to do. That and I've always just wanted. Never been like a huge fan of like some of the other schools where they just make you do one thing so you can get to your actual main course. Whereas that's not what really I like. I just like getting straight to the point and finish on getting focused on what I want to do instead of just being having to take years and years of doing something that I just don't like.
Yeah.
Just to get to my main course is something that I do like.
Okay. So a good starter for you would be that for a long time I've been interested and enjoyed working with computers, right? And so what is it in particular that led you to choose the IT program that you did? And this is going to be your transition statement that's going to bring you into the present. You're in hardware and software support, right? Is that your program?
Yeah.
Okay. So what led you to pick that in particular? What do you feel like you can do with that?
I picked IT mostly because it's something that I know that I can do pretty well.
Okay.
Around my expertise level, I'm always been so it's always been something I've been really good at. So it's easy to do for me, anyways.
Mm-hmm. So you're naturally good at it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm naturally good at what I do. Most likely, I'm not very good at coding or coding or really high end network stuff. So I probably want to end up jumping into that. But this is kind of something that's around my expertise, and I
Mm-hmm.
perform well at it. So
Okay. So now that brought you into the present, and you touched a little bit toward the future, but now you want to go the next step and talk about something about the future, and you're going to link yourself to something, couple of things at least in their job description. And so with my education and experience that I have in hardware and software support, in relationship to what you're offering in this position, I feel that I have strong ability to, and then because you know the job description, you'll mention a couple things, okay? And so that was a great first couple of steps of what you talked about right there. And so knowing that when they ask you, tell me about yourself, that's such an easy way to start off an interview, right? You've been out in the waiting area, someone came and got you, now you've walked back, you get seated in the office or at the desk or table where you're going to have the interview. And so it's really easy for them to say something like, well, Jerome, thanks for coming in today. It's nice to meet you. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? Sometimes when people hear that, it throws them over the edge, but it shouldn't, because we should expect that question because it's an easy way. And I always call that question the fishing license. In an interview, remember, anything we bring up or talk about, it's like a fishing license for them to go fishing for more information, right? So especially we want to be careful if we say something negative or something about a weakness. We want to be careful because if it's really like, they're like, really? Tell me more about that. You know, they think they're going to get like some juicy detail about something. So we want to be careful, but really know before you go to an interview and you're preparing the day before, if they say, tell me about yourself, what am I going to say? And have that prepared. I always encourage people to actually write out that answer, write it out. So you can sort of do your revision of it, and then it expresses exactly what you want the interviewer to know about you. All right. Next on here, why should I hire you? Yikes. Don't be caught by surprise if you get asked that. They may say it a different way. They may say, why do you think you're the best candidate for this job? Well, you don't know any of the other candidates most likely, right? And so it's very good to not try to compare ourselves to anyone else. We just talk about ourselves. But it's sort of like the tell me about yourself thing, you know? Why should I hire you? And in your mind, you're like, well, I looked at the job description like 100 times. I know what you're looking for. I know what sort of skills and abilities I have to offer. And so then you can tell them why you feel like you're a good candidate and that they should hire you. And again, it's good to write that out, write out your answer, practice it until it feels really, really comfortable coming out your mouth. Is totally different to think our answers up in our head versus practicing them out loud and getting them out of our mouth so that it feels smooth, so that our dialogue feels smooth. All right, let's go on to page 7, and we're going to talk about a new topic here. Too warm? Why? What's it? Oh. Oh. You don't hear me complain. Okay. Thank you. I know you took off your sweatshirt a while ago because I think it was too warm. All right, thanks. All right, next we're going to talk about a topic called behavioral interviewing, or maybe you hear the term performance-based interviewing. And this is a little bit different than what we call traditional interviewing. Traditional interviewing is when they ask you a question that might say, tell me what you would do, this is an example, if you had conflict with another employee. So it's hypothetical. They're asking questions that are hypothetical. What would you do if this sort of thing happened? But behavioral interviewing and performance-based interviewing, they're asking you to give them actual examples, times that these things actually happen to you. Because the belief is that however you did things or however you handled things in the past is how you're going to do them in the future. how you're going to handle them in the future. So when these questions used to be more hypothetical, you could answer based on how you think it should be handled or how you read about it in a book, but it might not be your actual experience, right? And so this is what they want to know about now is people's actual experience handling different types of situations that come up in their work. So again, this goes to support the need and the value of having your stories and examples ready to share. So let's look at some examples here. In another page, we're going to have a list of behavioral skills that you can use as you think about getting ready for interviewing. And on page 7 and 8, let's look at some of the main categories that questions will come from. The first one you see on there is teamwork. So they're going to ask you to tell about things that you have actually experienced that will show your ability to work with other people and to maybe work in situations that were challenging to you. And then you see next here is a client response skills, meaning how did you interact with people? So when we talk about clients, we got to remember that's not just people that come in off the street. That's a client. That's also our coworkers. And so when they ask about how you responded to other people, that's just about how you worked with your coworkers and the relationship that you had with them. So there's some different types of questions that they may ask of you. Next down here on page 7 is ability to adapt. This is a big one these days, ability to adapt, because things in the workplace right now in our history, they're just constantly changing, whether it's because of technology moving forward or because financial situations at companies can be changing quite a bit. There's just always seems to be things going on. And even statistically, like I mentioned Richard Bowles a few minutes ago in his book, What Color is Your Parachute? Last year in his updated book, he said that people statistically change jobs about every 18 months, whether people are losing their jobs or they're finding a new job to go to. Every 18 months, it means in your work environment, people are coming and going quite a bit. Even if you're not one of them, other people are coming and going. So that is about adapting to things that are changing. And the word flexibility is, you see that a lot in job descriptions, being flexible with changes. All right, page 8, a few more topics that you see asked about a lot are time management skills. And there are some different types of questions that you could be asked about there. Communication skills, and then motivation and values. Probably more so than ever out in the interviewing world is the subject of values and being aware and open to the cultural differences of people, because we work in groups of people that come from lots of different backgrounds, and we all have our different ideas about work and how to accomplish our work based on the background that we come from. All right, then you see on page 9 this list of behavioral skills here. And keeping in mind that in an interview, you're going to be asked these things. Tell me about and give an example of. And so here's a list of the different kinds of topics that can come up. All right, let's go to page 10. This topic here is about important interview questions for you to ask when you go to the interview. And the first thing I like to just remind people about is that an interview is a two-way street, and it's really important to keep that in mind. Sometimes we feel nervous at an interview, sometimes we feel desperate to get a job, and what we're focusing on is just showing ourselves in the best way possible. But this is a time that you get to sort of think like, all right, what is this person like? Because they're a representative of this company, right? And if you're in an interview and you think that they seem flexible and they have a good sense of humor and they seem like they'd be pretty easy to get along with, maybe they'll be your boss, looks like a good boss, or good representation of the atmosphere and attitude of the company. But if they're grouchy, they don't smile much, they're real quiet, I mean, could this person be your boss? Is this the type of person that you'd like to come in and work for every day or work with every day? You know, so take time to assess that person and ask yourself, so what do I think about this person? What would it be like to work with them every day? So that's the two-way street part, okay? And when it comes to important questions for you to ask, on page 10 and 11 here are different categories that questions could come from. So the first one you see here are questions about the job, just like day-to-day responsibilities about the job. What sort of activities would I do in this job in a typical day? You hear something interesting, you might ask, what percentage of my job is spent doing that sort of task? Might be something you really like and you look forward to. It might be something that you think, oh my gosh, I'm not going to like that part very much, because you know what? There's always little parts we don't necessarily like too much, isn't there? Always have that a little bit. So here are some different questions that you can ask that help the interviewer see that you're really tuned in, and also help you gather more information so you can make a really great decision for yourself if this is the job for you or not. Next on the list are some questions about training and development in your job. Is this job in this company, do they offer training that will help you grow, your career so that you can get promoted? Next are questions about your performance, to learn about the goals that are in this job and to ask about how your work will be evaluated. Okay, performance reviews, etc. And next are questions for you to ask the interviewer. And these can be questions, you got to be a little careful on asking the interviewer about themselves. But when you work in a couple questions about them, it just helps you to get to know them, and you're building this rapport by finding out what's important to them. For example, asking them, how long have you been with the company? And have you always been in this role? Or, you know, were you in a different role before this one? Seeing if they have grown with the company. Asking them maybe what their favorite thing about working for the company is. So I think I might have said this last week. We have a student that graduated a few weeks ago. Did you know Steve? He sat right here by the door. Steve, yeah. Well, he just got a new job. Did I tell this last week? I think I might have. Yeah. About what what are you looking forward to in this job? Well, they offer benefits, breakfast twice a week, and they have ping pong tables. So that could be his favorite part, you know, of working there. All right. Next, page 11 here. Here are some questions that you could ask about the company. What is important to the company as a whole? And next on the list here is to ask about the team. You could ask questions about the people that you're going to work with day in and day out. And, you know, sometimes somebody can kind of slip up and they answer questions for you, and you feel like, oh, I don't know. Something that they just said doesn't kind of sit right with you, but that could be about somebody that you're going to work with every day. So you can ask for them to tell me a little bit about the team or the group of people that I'll be working with. So they may not say their names, but they might describe them a little bit. And you might ask, you know, who is it that you would report to or get instruction from or get information from on a daily basis? Maybe the person interviewing you is not that person. And then you say, well, tell me a little bit about that person. Okay. Next on here is the culture of the company. And like I mentioned a moment ago, that is a really big topic that you'll find listed in most job descriptions. Something about being open to a diverse culture within the company, you know, knowing that at the end of every project, at the end of every day, we have worked together as a group of people, and that we come from different cultures, so we may have different ideas, we have different background, different experiences, but when we're open-minded and we are willing to listen and accept input that other people have, then we can bring all people's ideas together and come up with typically our best response or solution to a challenge. And then the last set of questions here that you could ask about are the next steps. So you can ask the interviewer, what are the next steps here? Will you be having second interviews? What's your timeline? When do you anticipate making a decision, making job offers? Whatever it is that you want to find out from them. And I want to point out a couple things in this little set of questions that can be really, really valuable. First of all, to ask these questions, is there anything that concerns you about my background being a fit for this role? Sometimes when we're interviewing, we can start to get a little bit of idea that they might be thinking like, I don't know if this person really has the experience. Go ahead and ask it right now, because then you get a chance to talk about it. The next one here, number 2, says, is there anything else I can provide you with that would be helpful? I think it's important to remember that people that interview us, they might be great at their job. They might not be so great at interviewing. So sometimes if we can help them out a little, it helps benefit us too. So by asking, is there anything else that you might like to ask me about? Now you've opened the door to them asking you. You've shown them that you're inviting them to ask you, and that is a chance for you to answer something that they might have a question about. And then again, asking about the next step in the interview process. And certainly not last but not least here, if this sounds like a job that you would like to have, be sure and tell them. What words are you going to use? What are you going to say? You got all these things going on in the last 2 or 3 minutes of your interview, and your mind is just buzzing like, okay, we're about to wrap up. I hope my interview went well. Do they like me? Are they going to give me a job offer? Or is there going to be another interview? What's the next step? All these things are like going through our mind at the same time. But we want to be sure. If the job sounds good, you want to tell them it sounds good, right? All right. So practicing your words and writing them out, practice them so they sound like you, is a great way to prepare. All right. Next, I want to go over 4 questions that I call the special zinger questions that pretty much guaranteed if you ask these questions in the job interview, the interviewer is going to be thinking, wow, this person is really getting invested in this job. They're really interested in what's going on. And so here's what the questions are. Number 1, as you think about hiring someone into this position, what's most important to you? And then you just let them answer. And after they've answered something, then you ask them, what else? Keep asking until they say, that's everything I can think of now. Because what do you get to do with that information? If you get offered the job, then you know what is really important to them, right? And that can be what you start on. That can be a goal of yours. Number 2, if you were going to prioritize based on what they just told you in number 1, in number 2, if you were going to prioritize these things, what would be the most important to you? Whatever they tell you is like number 1 and number 2, most important, that's what you can have in your mind that you're going to start off with when you come into that job. Number 3, if there were 1 or 2 concerns you might have as you bring a new person into this position, what would they be? Maybe this position, they're rehiring someone, and maybe the person's not in the position that was there previously because they weren't really doing some of the things in the job. And now you get to know that, so you can put that as a priority for yourself. And number 4, when you think back over how others have managed this position in the past, what were your frustrations? So now you get to find out what is going to keep this boss happy. Okay. All right. And I just want to encourage you to actually memorize these questions, get really, really, really familiar with them, practice them out loud, practice, 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 so that it becomes easy for you to ask that. So at the end, toward the end of the interview, someone will often say, do you have any questions for me? You might pull one of these out and say, yes, as a matter of fact, when you think about hiring a new person, what's most important to you and what's the number 1 priority? You could combine 1 and 2 together. All right, just about finished here, but let's just go real quick over what's considered to be kind of the top 5 interview mistakes that tell an interviewer a lot, but we didn't even talk yet, you know? One, of course, is arriving late for the interview. That just, you know, you can have detail-oriented, dependable, punctual, all that kind of stuff on your resume, but when you get there late, sort of blows all that info out of the water, doesn't it? Next is forgetting to bring hard copies of your resume. So that in itself seems like, wow, that's not like a deadly sin to not bring copies of my resume because they have it already. But it's one of those things that's expected. Like you dress nice, you got copies of your resume with you. You arrive on time. It's just expected. And the third thing on here is dressing inappropriately. You know, again, sometimes it's just this given that when we're going to an interview, we are dressed in a certain way. And when we come not dressed like that, then people are wondering, like, what the heck? You're going to an interview. Okay. Number 4 on here is to not research the company. A lot of times in interviews now, they come right out and they ask you, what have you learned about our company? Because you know what they want to know? Are you here to work at this company in this job, or are you just here trying to get a job? Any old job will do. So that's another one of the things that's expected. How we dress, that we got copies of our resume, that we got questions to ask them, and that we've researched the company. We know what the company business is. We know how things are going. We know how our job fits in. And the last one here is coming without questions prepared to ask the interviewer. So let's talk for a second about, you get in the interview and it's almost over and they say, well, Jerome, thanks for coming and interviewing with us today. Do you have any questions that I could answer for you, or any questions that you would like to ask? So then you open up that handy dandy portfolio that you brought with you that's got that pad of paper there where you've written down some questions that you wanted to ask, and you look and you think, you say, so you open your portfolio when they ask you that and you say, well, as a matter of fact, as I was getting ready for the interview, I did have some questions. And you look at your notes. And what if you look and you've already talked about all of those questions? Then what do? You can let them know. You say, well, as I was preparing for the interview, I did have some questions, and I had a question about blah, blah. Don't read the whole question, but just say 2 or 3 words. I had a question about the daily activities in this job. I had a question about what your priorities were, but we've talked about all those things already. Thank you very much. And then this is a time that you can say, because now you've responded, do you have any questions for me? And the worst answer in the world is no. The best answer is yes, here they are, or yes, but we've talked about all these things. And this is where you make that transition to saying, yes, I had, as I prepared for the interview, I had some questions that came to mind. They were about blah and blah, but as we have talked, you've answered all my questions. Thank you. There is one additional thing I would like to tell you about, or that I'd like to let you know. From everything we've talked about today, this job sounds great. I would like to let you know that I would really like to have this job. So that's the moment that you get to make that transition over to that statement, if that's how you feel about the job. Okay? So let's go to page 14. And this is a professional greeting. This is just a reminder about the steps that we practiced at the beginning today, because we want to remember. I like you to look at this slide just because I think it's funny. But what's that saying? You only have one chance to make a good first impression, right? So we don't want to look like that guy. And about how many seconds does it take to make that first impression? Yeah, it really starts immediately. So we could say, like, within 5 or 10 seconds, in a hiring situation, they're already deciding something about us. So here's a reminder of what's going on in those first few seconds, right? Good eye contact when they come out and call your name, good eye contact, smile, good handshake, and that small talk Some people feel like, oh, I hate that chit chat or that small talk. But you know what? It's a totally normal part of getting the interview started. So we just want to feel comfortable about doing it, knowing that it is going to happen as you're walking down a hallway and walking into an office and sitting down. And then what's the first thing they're probably going to ask you? Leads right into that favorite question. What is it? Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? So that's the rundown of how it usually goes. So this last page here is a checklist that you can run through, and I call it the after interview checklist, but it's good to go through it before your interview so that you just have a reminder of some things. And afterwards, you can ask yourself, all right, did I get there on time? If not, what happened? So you can adjust for it the next interview you go to, right? Was I dressed properly? Was I friendly with the receptionist? Did I introduce myself well with my professional greeting? These are just some different things that you can take into consideration that help you be really prepared each and every time. And then over on the right column there, I especially want to point out again, getting a business card, number 17 there, getting a business card so you have the correct spelling of their name, you have their correct email address. If you're going to send a thank you note in the mail, you have the address. What if you didn't get a business card? What can you do?
You could just ask them for an email or something.
Yeah. What if you get home and you realize you didn't get a business card? Then what? And you want to send a thank you email or a thank you card? What could you do? You could call the company and the person that answers, usually the receptionist, and just tell them your name and say, I interviewed yesterday, and maybe you don't even remember the person's name, which is like, I have to say, that's a terrible thing to do because it makes it seem like we weren't really prepared. But you can say, I interviewed yesterday with Miss Smith or with Mary Smith, or I interviewed yesterday for the position of IT support. And I'm calling to get the correct spelling of their name and their email address. So you can call up and ask. It's better to call up and ask, even if you feel kind of silly doing it, than to not send a thank you note because you didn't have that part. Because it shows a lot of initiative, and I think it shows some courage, actually, to call up if you didn't get the business card. So I think it's positive all the way around. And then number 18, be sure to send your thank you note or letter or email and then rate the company. Did you think, oh man, that is an A+ company? Everything sounded great. I really like to work there. Or was there some things sort of nagging at your gut and you think like, that is not the job for me. That is not the company that I want to work for. Give it a rating so it helps you remember later on. And then there's a place for you to make some notes down here at the bottom. Okay. And this is an example of a page like a lot of other handouts in the binder that you can photocopy and stick back in your number 8 tab back there to make sure that it's something that you can just use over and over to help you keep track of the interviews that you've had. All right, that's a wrap. Questions? Comment about anything? Okay, so next week I will have that mock interview packet ready to give you, and then it'll be 2 weeks afterwards that we'll do that, okay? All right, very cool. And have you started working a little bit on your resume? Okay, so when are you anticipating your graduation is? Okay, so like around 2 months. All right, so when you follow along in section 3 on getting your resume ready, maybe give yourself like a little bit to do every day for like a week. Don't try to do it all at once. Sometimes that's too big of a project. So when you get some parts put together, then let me know, and then we'll meet together and get it all polished up and ready. Okay? All right. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Yeah.